talking about AI and clean core today, and we have Chris and Joan from Lemongrass and Benjamin from AWS on the call with us and today's experts. And I would like to, this point, hand it over to you guys so you can take over the virtual screen and let us in the deep dive to today's topic.
Thank you so much, Alexi. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today to our webinar, and we will be focusing on an AI-driven approach to achieving a clean core in the SAP landscape. I'm Jo from Lemongrass. I'm joined by my colleague Chris and also Ben from AWS. Just to introduce those guys, we've got Chris. He's an enterprise architect at Lemongrass with 20 years SAP experience and in cloud transformation as well. He helps organizations modernize platforms, enable data-driven decision-making, and align technology with business outcomes. We also have Ben from AWS. He's a senior partner solutions architect, bringing over 20 years experience in his field. He's well known in the SAP and AWS communities, helping customers leverage AWS cloud services and SAP applications to meet business goals. He's also certified SAP on AWS specialist and a frequent speaker at user group events across Europe. I'm Jo, Principal Advisor at Lemongrass, Enterprise Architect in the functional space. I bring 20 plus years of SAP experience. I focus on large scale migrations, transformations and AI projects. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, folks. So what's our focus today? And I think Alexi spoke a little bit about it. So it's an AI-driven approach to achieving a clean core in SAP landscapes. So we'll be looking at how AI can actually accelerate the journey. First of all, what is clean core? We'll have a look at that. How can AI accelerate that journey? And how do AWS and Lemongrass make this real for customers, bringing it away from just theory? And I think as organizations are moving to S/4HANA and starting to embrace cloud-first strategies, software as a service, and getting those innovations, keeping the core clean is just becoming more and more critical, as we all know. AI will show in this webinar how AI can automate decision making, it can streamline processes and accelerate that path to a sustainable clean core. As I said, we'll go beyond the theory, we'll look at some real examples, and we'll look at how some practical steps to manage and minimize your custom code. We'll especially take a look at how AWS cloud services can integrate with SAP to modernize processes, in procurement, for example, getting that faster innovation and also supporting clean core. So it should be a good one. I'll pass it over to you, Chris, the next bit.
Thanks, Jo. So Lemongrass and AWS go way back. We've delivered some genuine firsts in the space of SAP and cloud. The first full production SAP system on cloud in AWS, large-scale migrations, SAP-centric Internet of Things projects, and now we're helping customers take the next big step with Clean Core AI. It's really been about continuous innovation, always pushing boundaries together.
Yeah, definitely. And I can say that as a partner solution architect supporting Lemongrass already for a long time, there have been a lot of ones first in the area, also SAP competency partner, and we're really glad to work together and be a trusted partner together in the SAP community.
Awesome. So let's take a little look at what actually is Clean Core. And I think most customers sort of see especially the extensibility side of it. So all of that code that's in a customer's system that's been modified over years, even decades. But it's so much more than just the actual code. There's, as you can see in this slide, there's the software. Are you on the latest version of that software? Are you on the latest patch? Is it completely compliant and ready? The extensibility, so this would be where the custom code, and it's an extension. Is it following quality standards? Are you using side-by-side extensibility, using the BTP, for example, or rehosting and using the likes of AWS to have that code compartmentalized in a place where it's separate from the core system? Integration is absolutely key. So are you utilizing clean techniques such as APIs, events, event mesh, things like that? Have you retired some of those older integrations that are now no longer used? Data. So I've seen in my time as an architect, I've seen many cases where data has been used perhaps not in an optimal way. Certain fields in key pieces of data, like a product master, being used to hard code logic into programs, processes. So one of the really great things about moving to a clean core is to actually move to a standard process, maybe a SAP standard process, where you don't need to modify the system anymore. It's a tried and tested process that's built over years and decades. Operations as well. Are you utilizing the best monitoring systems, the best workflows, the latest of the kind in there? So so clean core is so much more than just cleaning up the custom code. It's utilizing in a holistic way the best that you can in that way. And I think one of the things about it, it will make you more ready for upgrades. Things will feel more like a plug and play. It will move away. So when you're changing your code, it's less risky. Things are less likely to fall over if it's transparent and modern. And also it opens up it sets a stage for innovation later on down the line.
Exactly. When I speak to the customers I'm involved with, they don't see clean core as a housekeeping exercise. They see it as freedom, opportunity to move in the direction they want to, the chance to go faster without being shackled by yesterday's decisions or that technical debt that otherwise they'd carry with them.
Absolutely. And I think what are the questions when customers come to us and they're on a clean core journey, they're looking for a clean core strategy. And this slide sums up perfectly. The questions are, what do I have today? What does my core look like? And often I've seen it quite a few times where a client will say, our core is relatively clean, we're pretty standard. But what's happened is over the decades, more and more code has built up in the system, and the customer is not aware of quite how much code is in there, so it can be a little surprise. So being able to see what's in the system in a way that means something to people. Second question, okay, I know what code I have. What do I do with it? Can I retire some of that code? Can I revert it to something standard? Can I use an AWS feature instead of that code, for example? And then finally, once you've made that decision what to do with the code, how do you make the change? How do you implement that in the system? How do you test that? So these are the three questions we're hearing from customers today. And I think that this slide, it summarizes, we call it the 6 R's. So these are the things that you might like to do with code. So you could always look and see, code could be 20 odd years old. Can I actually retire that code? Has it not been used for 5 years? Is it not used very much at all? Revert, so this is where you would say, hey, there's a SAP standard alternative for this code now. There's a new app that can be used instead of this, a new report or functionality, even a piece of AI. Repurchase, this is a great one where you can actually look beyond the SAP standard features and look at some other standard features that are out there with other third parties, and Ben will certainly talk about a few of those shortly. Retain, so obviously you can't eliminate every single piece of custom code. There's some code in there which is differentiating you as a customer, something that really sets you apart, and there is perhaps no alternative to using a custom code, so you'd retain that. But you would perhaps rewrite it in a more compliant, modern way that's more transparent. So that would be retain. And then we have rehost. So you may move that code to the BTP if it makes sense. You can have side-by-side extensibility where your core might be the trigger, and the code will then be triggered in BTP and send the result back to S4, for example. And then finally, another great one, refactor. So you could potentially take that customization and refactor it onto the likes of AWS, and it will behave almost like a side-by-side as well there. And Ben will be talking about a few of those. So it's about those decisions. What will you do with that code? And it's essential to have this plan in place before you start to make those actual actions happen.
I think what's really interesting here is the customers where we're running this program are often surprised how many of their custom objects fall into the first three buckets: retire, revert, or repurchase. Because what that is it's a quick and easy way to eliminate technical debt. And those easy wins are just really fast and very effective to be able to achieve in a really short space of time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so exactly what Joanne say and what Chris say, having these easy wins, these quick wins is essential. And we see that as well. So that's why we partner so well, AWS and Lemongrass. We have the same vision there. And if you look in the bucket, I would say the bucket repurchasing, in traditionally SAP customers are always looking into the SAP domain for finding the solutions, but more and more customers are now also more comfortable in looking outside of the SAP domain in solutions from independent software vendors, from cloud service providers. And what helps there and what accelerates that is marketplaces. And of course, we know the SAP marketplace, but if you look at how the market perceives marketplaces, you see that Amazon Web Services together with Salesforce is leading IT marketplaces. And I'll actually filtered out some of those numbers for you from our over 10,000 of solutions that we have on our AWS marketplace available that are for SAP. And that starts with very practical things like an SAP operating system to run your HANA on, to integrated solutions for IoT or three-way matching of documents. The benefit is there that you as a customer can easily procure. You do not have all the procurement cycles with the different vendors. It comes from a single marketplace with a single way of working. And if you already have a presence or you bring your SAP system to AWS Cloud, that is a real accelerator in that progress to clean core, and repurchasing is that quick win there. When we look a step further, I named it repurchasing and refactoring because it's a little bit hybrid, and we see it especially in the area of hybrid data architectures, but it can be applicable to more. We see that more and more customers are also rethinking the usage of data analytics products, for example. So here in this picture, we show 3 customers that have chosen completely different routes for their data analytic needs, where they use both native services from AWS, those are the building blocks that you see in purple and green, for example, where they extract data out of SAP, enrich it and visualize it using our AWS native services, but also ingest other streams that they have, for example, from IoT devices, or they use SAP products like SAP HANA and SLT combined with ISV vendors like Qlik or Databricks, and have multiple visualization tools to consume it to their business users. And then we see a combination where again an AWS service is used to extract data from an SAP system, and then it's split up into a data warehouse and a data lake, where the data lake is, for example, on AWS, and then visualized again with tooling from Qlik. So here you see that the repurchasing and the refactoring comes together to build these solutions, and that actually helps to optimize and to remove additions that were usually made into the core system of SAP, or actually systems that are going to be retired into a more hybrid data approach or a more composable architecture using native services and solutions from software vendors.
And what I like about this as well, it's consistent, Ben, with what we're hearing from our customers as well. There's no one size fits all approach. I think every organisation ends up with a mix of some sort, a bit of refactoring, a bit of repurchasing, sometimes retaining and reverting. It really is a spectrum, isn't it? And getting on that right path gets you closer to that clean core.
Exactly. So when we move a step further in refactoring, as Joanne said, and you sometimes really need to do something in your core system. And for those who have been on top of this, on top of the news from SAP, SAP recently changed the extension levels from a tiering 1 to 3 to a ABC level for clean core extensibility. And we can support all that with AWS as well. A few years back, we launched the AWS SDK for SAP ABAP. What we saw and what we heard from customers that they wanted to use cloud services in their SAP system, but they had to do a lot of heavy lifting and integrating that into the code, writing lots of lines of code. And we took that away by providing them an SDK for the ABAP programming language. And that is not only for your what we call on-stack development, it's also available for the BTP ABAP cloud for side-by-side extensibility. And that also allows you to use, if you are on the route to HANA Public, S/4HANA Public Cloud, formerly known as GROW, the Cloud ERP Public, that you can also use that in the BTP to build side-by-side extensibility. And what does that give you? It gives you all the AWS services, all the 200 plus services in your ABAP code base with just a few lines of ABAP code that you can call it and use it. And you might say, hey, Benjamin, this is very abstract. It's nice to see this architecture, but what can I actually build with that?
So just before we move on to that, Ben, just a moment to recap. So we're thinking about the A, B, C, D classification from SAP, where A is your cleanest core and D is needing work to clean it up. Are what we're saying that for those level A extensions, the customer now has a choice? They can do it natively on AWS and microservices, or they can build it on BTP, and both of those are supported by AWS toolsets.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Great. Sorry to ruin your flow. I'll move to your next slide.
Thank you for that. So that's definitely true, Chris. And what we see is that a lot of customers are struggling with the same extensibility topics in their SAP systems. And well, let's pick a few. I will not address them all, but every customer that runs SAP has some kind of file transfer or data transfer to an institution. Is it a tax institution? It could be your auditor. It could be a bank where you need to transfer your payment instructions to. We see all these customers having solutions there that might be built on top of old infrastructural deployments, using native services from AWS directly from your ABAP code base could accelerate that. So the whole secure transfer and file interactions is one of those. Intelligent document processing. We see a lot of older deployments where in the past solutions were acquired that cost a lot of money that can easily be transformed going forward into cloud native services. But also very small things like an address translation or a location service. And of course, what we see a lot, customers that cannot scale their, let's say, their Christmas sale into their SAP system. They want to extend it into an event-driven or a serverless architecture to support their hundreds of thousands of customers that will be touching upon their web shop in a few days, but don't want to scale their SAP system for that. Then they can step into AWS event-driven architecture to support that and not overload their SAP system for these unique events, for example.
Thanks, Ben. That's a great summary of how customers can use AWS services alongside SAP to refactor and keeping that core clean. And just sort of stepping back to the framework we discussed earlier in terms of what have I got in terms of clean, code in the system. What do I do with that code? How do I do it? we've looked at the principles from the 6 R's through to the examples that you've just shown there, Ben. I think it would be great to introduce the Lemongrass LCP AI Clean Core tool at this point. Chris, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thanks so much, Joe. So Lemongrass and the main topic of this talk have built a platform which uses some clever newer technologies, Gen AI among them, in order to help answer those questions for customers. What do I have in my system today that needs to be cleaned? How do I go about cleaning it? And then, and we're working on some of the newer functionality on the last question. How do I go about solving that problem? And the LCP AI, I'd like you to think about it as an architect's sidekick. And I want you to keep that in your mind as we go through it. So this isn't a tool that purports to replace people. What this is really doing is empowering teams to move faster and solve problems that otherwise they wouldn't be able to solve without the technology. The AI acts like your sidekick. The tool analyzes the system, groups custom objects together, links artifacts, and even generates specs and unit test scripts. Instead of doing a long discovery slog, and we've spoken to many customers who have spent 6-12 months going through and categorizing all their ISFs, making sure their specs are up to date, doing a full inventory as part of a phase 0 for a clean core project, or even an S4 journey, or one of the many use cases. This takes just a short 10 to 12 week project and answers the questions: what do I have? What should I do with it? And how do I solve the problem? That's what Clean Core AI purports to answer.
Exactly. And it will give you a suggestion, Chris, and it will, one of those suggestions being perhaps a repurchase, for example, and the suggestion could be that you plug into AWS native services, like those that Ben has just spoken about before, or SAP standard tools, whatever makes sense for that scenario.
Great, thank you so much. So now, very dangerous, I shall attempt a live demo of the tool. If for whatever reason we have a situation like maybe Meta did the other day, I have a recording ready to go, but let's give it a go, dive in and see how we get on. So this is the Clean Core for AI tool from Lemongrass, LCP Clean Core AI. And we see here we're on the home screen. There's a bunch of information here, but don't worry, I'll walk you through this step by step. This system has ingested the information from an SAP IDES system or a demo system. So this isn't real customer data, it's just an example that we use to show the capabilities. In this system, there are 48,000 custom objects and 3 and a bit million lines of ABAP code. That is typically lower than we see with customers. We have customers who have 2 or 3 times this amount, and some of our largest customers have 10 times this volume of custom code in their system that they've built out over decades normally. What the tool has done is it's taken all that information about the standard code and also the custom code, and it's built clusters of the custom code to make it into something that we understand as SAP consultants. And that's where it's arrived at a RISE-FW list and categorized them into workflows, reports, interfaces, conversions, enhancements, and forms. We can take a look at those clusters in a bit more detail. So here's a list of all the clusters in my Z01 IDES system. And we can jump into a really simple example. Let's take arithmetic. Once I click on the cluster, it's then giving me a series of options about what I can look at with regards to this particular cluster. And the first is just a summary. As I mentioned, it's a very simple example, but I could go to graph here. And here it shows me how the entry point to this cluster relates to the objects around it. So I have 3 functions related to this entry point, and I can click on those functions and go to Quick View to have a look at what those functions are about. So I can see the source code here. I can have a look at the functional specification that has been generated, any SAP standard features, and I can generate this live with Claude that may replace this. Of course, this is a really simple example and not a great one to look at standard features that might replace it. So I'll just click off here. And this is really easy to understand, right? We can see the data flows, the direction of them, the entry point, the different functions. And in this simple example, a human being can very easily hold in their mind a mental map of what this looks like. But of course, in the world of SAP, things are very rarely simple. So here's an example of a bigger cluster. And I can refresh this and generate it on the fly with the tool. And you can see our entry point now has many, many more connections. And the data flows are much more complicated. And I can follow these data flows by tracking where they go on the system and see how they relate to the other objects, being able to quickly and graphically see the dependencies of all the different custom objects in the system and how they relate to one another. And there's a lot of metadata here as well about how those relationships work. So you'll see it, there's a color scale, and that's customizable. So we could have red, green, or whatever we want. It's set to blue, green at the moment. And it shows you how much something is either towards the top end or the low end of the scale. And we can look at betweenness, which is how the tool is working out the relationship between the objects using heuristics and data science to form those clusters, where we've had lots of help from a range of data science teams, including those from our hyperscaler friends. And also in degree is another metric, and out degree used to form information about those clusters and how it's related. But we could also look at something like usage. And of course, with an IDES system, don't take this in too much detail. With a customer system, this takes the metadata from production about how often those programs and custom objects are used, which helps feed into other information in the tool, such as the retirement score. Retire score, which tells you how the AI tool believes how likely it is we could retire this object safely because no one's using it in the system, for example, although there are lots of other information that feed into that score rather than just usage statistics. Right. So we go back to our simple code here. We can have a look at all of these objects, and we can go to an artifact editor, which allows us to look at this object in a bit more detail. So we have here the source code. This is a really simple example, just with 3 functions being called. But we can go in and we can generate a functional specification. Here's one that was generated earlier by Sonnet. And you can see on the right side, what it's done for each section of this document is we've asked the AI not only to generate the functional specification in a controlled way with the temperature turned down, and also special calls to make sure that we're calling the API in such a way that we get consistent output every time. Anyone who's used an AI without controls like this knows that the answer can change if you ask the same question 5 times, but we solved for that problem and now we get consistent output. But we've also asked the AI to check itself, and we've got special prompts, and we've worked with, for example, Amazon on how we would do this for Claude in order to make sure the AI is producing something it thinks is high quality, or if it's not, it's alerting us that it's concerned about the output it's provided. Here in this example, you can see it has a 95% feeling of confidence around these areas, 100% for batch job details, 95% for operational considerations. The functional spec itself, out of the box, contains these sections, including a section that shows the flow of the code graphically, so you can see how it's going through decision-making and processes. For a simple example like this, it's relatively straightforward, but this can really help with some more complicated code examples to explore how the code is going through different processes and understand what it's doing in more details. These sections are completely customizable. So here we can even look under the hood a bit at some of the prompts that are being generated to get the information into the functional spec from Claude in this example. And each of those is tightly controlled and managed in order to produce the output. And we work with customers to make sure the functional specification shows exactly what they need in the functional specs, either from an auditor requirement or from what they're looking to understand about their existing code base. And that's great. We've understood now which RISE-FW items we've got in our system, and we've been able to generate a functional spec for them. But none of that really means anything without a business process hierarchy. So we can jump into the business process hierarchy area of the tool. And by default, there's, let me just change this to entry points. By default, the tool loads in the best practice business process hierarchies from SAP in Signavio and also from LeanIX. Customers don't need licenses for Signavio or LeanIX to use these. It's just it uses the business process hierarchy that those tools have loaded by default. We can also here, and what we're doing with customers today, is load the customer's business process hierarchy or some other breakdown of their processes and custom objects that they want to see. And the great thing here is you don't need to pick one because the tool is building these associations. We can flip between different business process hierarchies and we can use multiple at the same time in a lightweight way. That doesn't mean every time we change our business process hierarchy, we need to go through a painful exercise of recategorizing everything. We can also zoom in that business process hierarchy. So I can jump into human resources, for example, and org management, and then I can click on any of these numbers and it will take me through to the list of items. And this is also customizable from a filter point of view. So right now I'm looking at custom objects and entry points, which is that clustering I spoke about before, only for custom programs. But I could look at standard programs if I wanted to, or I could look at only show me function modules. It's very flexible in how it works, but this default view we believe is really useful to speak to business process owners about which custom objects in their area, which RISE-FW items in their area should be reverted back to SAP standard, should be retained because we really need it on stack, can be refactored or repurchased using AWS functionality. And we can click through on these items. It's not just a list. And it gives us all that information we saw earlier. So here's a functional specification, here's the source code, here are the other objects it relates to. So it gives you all that information in one place, facilitating a conversation and decision-making with the relevant business process owner. What I'd now like to do, once we've thought about what we've got today, is to look at the second question, which is, what would I do with those items? So going back to our simple example at the beginning, and jumping back into our entry point, we have some assessments. So we talked about being able to purchase from the marketplace or revert to SAP standard, and this is where that happens. So we can look at SAP standard features that might work to replace this function, and we can look at third-party apps that might replace this piece of code. Of course, the arithmetic function is a terrible example. So let me just jump into a better example. So this is an example where we've got over 50,000 lines of code. It's more representative of what a customer might experience. And here in the standard features, we've got manage settlement documents as a Fury app as the first option, and the fourth option, settlement management. And it's rated those 97% and 90% likelihood of usefulness, respectively. So an architect or a relevant consultant can come in here, have a look at the original code, look at the functional specification, understand what that's doing, and then look at replacement options with standard SAP features, or looking at third-party apps through marketplaces, such as in this case, Bright Price Rebate is suggested, which is a great example of something that would replace that custom functionality and shed that technical debt and share it, in the case of the repurchase option, with all of the customers of Bright Price Rebate. So taking all that information, what I've got today, understanding it properly, looking at the options of what I can do with it, we arrive at a disposition analysis that is summarized here on the front page. And it's looking at those 6 R's that Joe spoke about earlier on. So retiring, reverting, repurchasing, retaining, rehosting, or refactoring, be it on AWS as a native service or be it on SAP BTP. And you can see here, whilst this isn't representative of a customer example, it's just an IDES system, a great number of the RISE-FW items can be retired, reverted, or repurchased, heavily reducing the technical debt in a really short space of time with less input than would be required if we were to do this in a more traditional way. This is our good. Let me talk a little bit about what we're planning to do next with the tool. So we view that the tool can not only be used to look at what you have today and what you want to do with it, but also can help with that question of how. And the question of how is where we see linking to other tool chains that are already investing billions of dollars in solving that question. With all the information we've ingested, understanding what needs to be done with those tools, we believe we can generate a really high quality 2B specification for the transformed code and relevant information around it. And by integrating with tools like Signavio and LeanIX, we can both get richer data for the Clean Core AI tool, but also provide relevant artifact links to enrich the decision-making process for business processes, application realization, rationalization, and other strategic decisions about the application portfolio. We also look at WalkMe. So let's say I'm reverting a process to SAP Standard. Wouldn't it be so cool if users going to the old way of doing things, their old transaction for their custom code, were prompted by WalkMe, fed from Clean Core AI, to now launch the SAP Standard Fury app to do that function instead, really facilitating organizational change management. Not thinking about old desktops that everyone ignores and everyone hates, but built into the tool and fed from Clean Core AI, orchestrating that change. And what we're really excited about, the killer bit of this, is taking that 2B functional specification and integrating with SAP and AWS and other hyperscalers tool chains, including Joule for Developer and Amazon Q Developer, and ABAP Test Cockpit, to build working code. We see this by deploying containerized versions of the code transformed by tools like Q Developer and running test cases generated in the 2B specification, looping back through a cycle with any bugs found in the containerized version of the code, helping Q Developer build an updated, even better version of the code, going through the cycle until we have something not only compiles, but passes all of those tests from a semantic point of view, ready to be checked by a human, really accelerating the process of getting to the conclusion. AWS, of course, have recently built AWS Transform, and that's the same idea. AWS Transform is for mainframe, VMware, and .NET workloads, and we see this as being the equivalent for SAP and SAP customizations.
Yeah, and like Chris said, we are as AWS and Amazon, we're on top of this as well, and we have been working on getting the SAP code base into Amazon Q Developer already for a long time. But we're really happy to announce that we have launched it for the Eclipse integration as well, which is what we see the most of the ABAP community is using. And not only for ABAP, but also for RAP and CAP development, which is on the BTP side of the spectrum. And it really helps to make these systems clean and get this core clean around and built around the traditional SAP system. And what we saw from and what we heard from customers, they said, okay, we would like to use Joule Developer as well, but we're still on ECC. We're not on SAP RISE yet, which is a requirement and a first step to get to the Joule Developer Edition. And would there be nothing that you can help us with that we can use now and accelerate our journey now? So that's why we invested in the Amazon Q Developer for SAP. And the customers that are already using it are really showing great examples of improvement there, and not only for creating that code, but also for the testing and the documentation behind it. So it's not only finding what you want to change, but also the toolkit to get you there. And again, it's not to remove developers at all. It is this extra person, virtual person that helps you to be a successful developer and helps your organization to accelerate there.
Yeah, great points, Ben. So just sort of looping back to basics, I think it's this slide, it sort of demonstrates the books is about knowledge. It helps, it's symbolizing what do I have, what do I have in my current system in terms of custom code. Once you know what you have, you're in a place of power. You can then start to look at what to do with it. And obviously LCP AI helps to demystify and support those decisions. And like Chris was saying, an architect's sidekick is one of the ways that we like to see it. It accelerates those decisions. Can I retire this code? Can I revert it to SAP standard? Can I repurchase a third-party tool? Can I rehost it with AWS, for instance? Should I put it on the BTP? And then once you know what you're going to do with that, you then want to deploy that. And the little speedboat icon here is it's facilitating and speeding that process up. Obviously, if you're using a tool like Amazon Q Developer, that's an absolute clear way of speeding that process to getting that code cleaned up in your system. So it's turning that knowledge into action, quick action. And that's the way I like to see it there.
Great. So to wrap up then, Clean Core is about clarity. It's about flexibility. Together, Lemongrass and AWS make it achievable.
Absolutely. And if you want to see LCP AI in action, feel free to scan the QR code on this slide here. Feel free to book a chat with us, a demo or even a pilot of LCP AI. It's been fantastic speaking to you all today.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chris, Joanne, and Benjamin, for the interesting presentation, and also for the live demos. Always interesting to see how it actually works. And like I said, feel free to contact. You can see the contact information there, and you will receive the PDF materials afterwards, and also the recording of the presentation via email feedback form. And I was checking that if there are any open questions on the Q&A, not right now, but if you are typing at the moment, feel free to do it, and we will also contact you later on if there is any open questions. But thanks for everybody who was on the line. And do you want to say any final remarks for the webinar?
Just to wish everyone a happy and fun evening, and don't forget, Clean Core, AI, Lemongrass, and AWS.
I like it, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. That's a nice summary.
It's a great summary. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.